So after the opening statement, please call the roll.
All right, and Ian, are we okay to stream out on YouTube? Yes, Ian?
Yes.
I'm going to start the recording. All right, it's now 4 o'clock. This is the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Governmental Affairs and Rules on June 24th. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this virtual meeting of the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Governmental Affairs and Rules will be conducted via remote means only in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. The public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit capecod.gov. Members of the public may attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams, and you can join at capecod.gov. All of the information is available there. The chair thoughtfully asked for a roll call, and so I'll proceed directly to that. Deputy Speaker and Chair Frizzell.
Here.
Delegate Green.
Here.
Delegate Killian.
Here.
Delegate O'Malley. You're muted,
Here.
Delegate O'Malley. And wearing many, many hats, the Assembly Dean, the Chair of Finance, who is the Vice Chair of this committee, due to his large seniority, the one, the only Delegate from Dennis, John Oman. So we have a full complement, Mr. Chair and Deputy Speaker, and I do have one alternate for you, Delegate Harder from Harwich, if there's technical problems or you need somebody. So
Great.
You're all set, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to everyone for attending on a short notice. We have a lot of business this summer, it seems. So the next item for business today is item 3, which is a proposed resolution 2026-5, amending the Assembly of Delegates Manual of Governance and Procedures, Section 14, on procedure for consideration of proposed ordinances, which is sponsored by or submitted by the delegate from Sandwich, James Killian. So, Delegate Killian, would you like to start the discussion of this item?
Certainly. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Just forgive my voice, a little vocally challenged this afternoon. But this is a resolution I put forward, and it's Owen and I have discussed it over the years here and there. But essentially, it is trying to get the committee responsibilities more in line with other legislative bodies. There has been instances in the past where issues have gone to committee, but they've been voted out without a positive vote of the committee. In other words, they might have come out 2-3 and against that get voted to the assembly. And I just thought that was kind of odd. I felt that the committee should be there to do the work necessary to make any changes to any piece of legislation that we feel that is worthy of assembly consideration. And really what I would like to do is again, give that responsibility so that if in fact you have an ordinance that isn't particularly popular with the committee, that they will do the work necessary to make it so that they agree that it should be passed along in a positive manner to the assembly. Now, there are mechanisms in there so that if the assembly decides, hey, we want to vote on this anyway, the full assembly can vote and pull it out of the committee. But in all the years I've had working with committees, we certainly have the capability of doing the work necessary to make sure that what is discussed at the assembly is fully vetted. And I use an example recently of the generator ordinance, which we've been working with, where we found through our inquiry that it wouldn't pass muster with our council. So if we had just done sort of a cursory look at it, it would have been passed the assembly and very likely could have passed the assembly where it would have died an ugly death at the commissioners where they said, no, you really can't do this. So I just think it's important for us as committees, because these committees are important, to do the work necessary to make sure what they review and what they produce and send to the assembly has been fully vetted, in that a majority of the members believe that it is worthy of assembly consideration.
Thank you. I think that your proposal has two paragraphs, and what you talked about was the second paragraph. The first paragraph is also something new. Right now, we don't have a procedure where the clerk makes an assignment with the approval of the speaker as the mandatory way in which assignments are made. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk? I'm just trying to see if I understand your memo on this resolution correctly.
So, to be clear, we have a mechanism in our rules currently where if the assembly doesn't decide where a public hearing is going to be on an ordinance, that the speaker can decide where to put it. Okay, and so the way that the charter works, if any delegate or the commissioners as a whole can introduce an ordinance, and if it's not rejected at the same meeting by delegates representing 3/4 of the county population, it gets a hearing as of right. And previously, going back a long ways, sometimes that hearing would be in front of a smaller group of the assembly, and oftentimes it would be in front of the full assembly. We were told informally by KP Law that we were probably safer with our charter if all the public hearings were in front of the full assembly. But that provision and that custom is what the speakers have used since I've been here for 5 years to kind of direct where things go, because inherent in the power of the speaker to direct staff, but also to appoint the committee members is the kind of ability to control the work of the committee. So we've been customarily doing that. We have a provision in our rules that permits permissively the assembly to make a referral to committee. But that hasn't been the way the assembly normally does it. If you can remember at the last meeting, we had 5 ordinances and 2 resolutions, and I don't know that anybody would want to sit there and figure out where they all go. And so in speaking with Delegate Killian, the idea was that budgetary ordinances and now anything with money in the past couple of years has been given to finance and cannot be taken up by the assembly until finance makes a report. And the idea was to kind of enforce that work flow on any ordinance that gets introduced. But this is new, to make this explicit in the rules that the speaker has the right to do this. But it's more, if I could editorialize for a minute, codifying the way we already do things versus anything new.
And can I ask you, if we did adopt this first paragraph of this resolution, would that require any further tinkering with other provisions to make it harmonious with the other ones and avoid any conflict?
I was trying to use a scalpel and add the most, I gave it to Delegate Killian, obviously, but I worked on drafting it. I don't believe so. I think it's I don't think it's conflicting with anything else. I can do another check if and when the assembly wanted to take this up to make sure, but I don't believe that it would cause any conflicts with other parts of the rules to do it
About
this
the one
way.
about the one you just mentioned on public hearings.
I mean, that rule should probably be looked at eventually, but if you think about it, the public hearing part, I mean, if the assembly doesn't make a referral, right, the speaker can do that. I think that they could still, that's kind of how we do things. I mean, all the public hearings are going to the full assembly anyway, but I think one thing to keep in mind, again, without editorializing, is for all of these rules, they can be changed by the will of the majority. Even if you set a threshold that's higher, the majority can still change that threshold later if it's not contained in the charter. So the idea is, even if the speaker put it somewhere that the assembly didn't like, the assembly could vote to transfer it to somewhere else. Or the assembly could certainly make that referral on its own rather than relying on the speaker or the clerk to do it. So.
Well, if we adopted paragraph 1, wouldn't it not go that way? It would be the clerk with the approval of the speaker.
Absolutely, but let's say you got a notification that something was in a committee and the whole body didn't like it. I mean, the whole body could move it to wherever it is they want it to be. I don't envision that happening, but
Yeah,
You could
okay.
discharge it, or you could make a motion to refer it to an additional committee, or you can make a discharge it and send it to a different committee. It's just the idea that there's only 15 of you, and it's rather flat rather than hierarchical. And so if the body didn't like where something went, they always have the option to move it around.
And could you also explain for us, because it's in your memo,
Hmm.
so we all understand this, that we currently do have, in effect, a discharge from committee rule by virtue of our operating by default under Robert's Rules of Order, if there isn't a specific rule that we have adopted in the Assembly. Can you explain how that works right now so we understand how this would change, potentially change for business?
My understanding of how that works right now is there is a standard, I believe it's a main motion, discharge a committee. I did discuss earlier today, it is kind of clunky language wise to say discharge a committee rather than discharge an item from committee. However, the way that it works now, my understanding is if you were to come to a particular meeting and that night try to discharge something from committee, the threshold for that is a two-thirds vote.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you were to give notice that you intended to do that, so let's say you came to a meeting and when the speaker called for new business, you said, I make a motion that we make discharging ordinance 2026-14, the general ordinance, for example, from telecom. Um, I make a motion to make that the order of the day at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Then that would go on the business calendar and you, by majority vote, could discharge it. So I think that my understanding, I'm still rather new at this, but I'm learning a lot this summer as I get this certification from the National Association of Parliamentarians. It seems to be a protection against being surprised or not being prepared to make an argument, to have something be discharged at the same exact time you're making the motion.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a
So,
discharge rule currently.
okay, so this would, in effect, if adopted, would change the discharge rule we currently operate under, which is a majority with notice, two-thirds if no notice, and make it all, regardless, notice or no notice, two-thirds.
I believe that's accurate. Yes,
Okay.
Deputy Speaker.
So we would be overriding Robert's Rules of Procedure.
Yes, because I mean, Robert's Rules is like 900 pages long, and the people in the preface will tell you 80% of it you never really need, but
Mm.
it's meant to cover all eventualities, and so you wouldn't. That's why you adopt a parliamentary authority. You never want to put all of that in our rules,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's certainly, if it's something that needs to be clear, you could put it in there. Now that you're asking, I'm trying to pull up the exact rule itself, but I spent some time with this and I did provide it to all of you. I believe I'm
Yeah,
characterizing it
yeah.
correctly.
Yeah, you are. I saw your link to the rule itself. I read the rule itself. So I now would like to know if other members of this committee would like to ask questions or would like to make comments. Some entertaining discussion. I see two hands. First from Delegate Green, then Delegate O'Malley. Go ahead, Delegate Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity. So, um, is there an objection? I think I'm directing this to the chair, to Delegate Killian. Is there an objection to having the speaker make assignments to committees? Um, that to me just seems odd that the clerk would be the one making the assignments. Can I ask a multiple questions that way, or do you want me to ask them all together?
Well, why don't we start with one at a time and get them answered? You can, all right?
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you.
Clerk I think, wants to say something about this. Go ahead, Clerk.
I do, especially because I am the clerk and it seems like it's giving power. And I did work very closely with Delegate Killian to, not that he needs my help, but he's a busy guy, to help him draft this. And so the idea was to not invent language out of whole cloth. I did look, because really there's only two options here. You could look at a place with a city form of government, or you could look at the legislature, because there's no other county legislative body in Massachusetts. And so I did take a look at the House rules, the Senate rules for the general court, and the joint rules, and all of them, it's either the clerk makes that determination with the approval of the Senate President, or the clerk of the House makes that determination with the approval of the Speaker. And what I can tell you, having been here 5 years, is that just codifies how we do things. One of the calls that I always make is to whoever is Speaker when we've got ordinances, and say, which one do you want, where do you want this heard? Where do you want the next step to be? And I just work here. And so I'm kind of forced to put it wherever they want me to put it. And so I think it's probably that way because there's more volume at the next level. And so I would, yeah, I don't want to make any assumption, but I would assume that the Speaker doesn't want to be involved in the 7,000 bills and where they go. But if there's any question as to where they should go, that it's going to be whoever's Speaker who makes that determination. So that's why it's there, because I'm always looking for parallel examples rather than inventing my own language out of full cloth.
But ultimately, I think from that, ultimately, the Speaker makes the decision, ultimately. Yeah.
Absolutely. All of you on this committee, we did it by seniority, are used to working with me. So what happens is I may look at the calendar and make a suggestion, or the deputy speaker or the finance chair, dean may also weigh in if we happen to be on a call about it. But in the end, I'm always saying, here are some of your options. Here are things that make sense. Here's the calendar. Here is the membership. Speaker, where would you like this heard next? That's codification of how we do it now.
Okay, next question.
I want to clarify this.
Oh,
because
okay.
I'm not satisfied with the answers, to be quite frank. While I have every confidence that Owen is doing a great job, I'm always looking into the future and to see that we're not establishing something based upon the capabilities of the person that is in the office at this particular time. And I see where there could be some loopholes here. While the Speaker would have to approve it, I'm perfectly happy with the way it is operating right now, where the clerk reaches out to the Speaker and asks the Speaker where they would like to see, an item, which committee. And if the Speaker then says to the clerk, well, what is your opinion? I mean, I'm fine with that, but I think it's the role of the Speaker. We have so many fewer bills, legislation. We have so many fewer resolutions and ordinances than the state legislature, which has hundreds upon hundreds. And so this is not in that situation at the State House, I can see where that is a specialized clerk responsibility. I wanted to see if Delegate Killian had any pushback or, has a different opinion that, to change what we have right now, given that's.
If I may,
Yes, go right ahead.
Mr. Chair. So, Delegate Green, what is it specifically you're concerned about? You mentioned about the authority that the clerk has, but it's only pursuant to what the Speaker approves. So what specifically is your concern?
Well, I just think it's like two different animals. I think it's, we deal with so many, we don't deal with that many ordinances or resolutions. I mean, I'm perfectly happy with the way it works now. I mean, I just feel that it's a different thing at the State House when there are all of these bills that are flowing, that's somebody's full-time responsibility, probably, about assigning where the bills go, and the committees and all of that. That's a huge job and a huge responsibility. This is just a piece of the job for a speaker or for the clerk. And there are some issues that, come up in the county. And, let's say in the future, a clerk has a better rapport with one of the delegates as opposed to another, and it could go to either committee. I think we elect the speaker, we give the speaker the authority to take on these tasks. And I think that would be a cleaner way to continue forward. Do you have any objections to that, Delegate Killian?
Well, again, I'm just not concerned about it because, as it specifically says, it's with the speaker. So the clerk shall, unless they are subject to other provisions or other ordinance, refer each proposed ordinance with the approval of the assembly speaker to the standing committee. So where are you concerned that the clerk is going to take control of everything if they have to do it through the approval of the speaker?
Well, if two delegates, I think I've stated where I'm coming from.
I know, but I don't understand where you're coming from. It's because
Well,
it
if
seems you're
there's an issue,
concerned.
if there's an issue, and one of the delegates wants their committee to have that issue, but another delegate wants that issue to come before their committee, then in that situation, I think it's really I don't think that a clerk could be put in a bad situation, with that kind of
Okay, but
setup,
the
or
speaker.
the clerk could have a better relationship with one of the delegates rather than the other. Now, I understand what you're saying about the speaker having the final say, but I think it's the responsibility of the speaker to determine where these go. That's just my point of view.
Well, it is ultimately because the speaker will decide where these go, and if a situation arose that you referred to, where there was perhaps a disagreement, the person who disagreed would contact the speaker, as happens right now. I can tell you that it happens, where they'll contact the speaker and say, we want to bring this into committee. So I don't think that changes really the much of what we're doing now. It just basically gives a more clear path to how these will travel through the assembly. The clerk will manage it with the final authority of the speaker.
Well, I don't agree. So,
Okay.
it's an honest disagreement.
Okay.
Right.
Did you have another
Okay.
question?
I've taken, I've taken a lot of time, but if somebody doesn't come up, I mean, I know we have a short amount of time, so I won't take any more time right now. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate O'Malley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Clearly this ordinance has two pieces, and what we're on right here is the piece of how an introduced proposed ordinance is divvied out to community to committee. It strikes me that this question of whether it's the clerk or the speaker is not really a change. It's how the process happens now, and I could make the case that it is the clerk who has the better sense of perspective about what committees have been doing, what they have coming up on their calendar, and really how the time distribution is going to be feasible. But ultimately, again, it's the speaker who's going to have to decide. That's true now. That would be true in the future. So I'm pretty comfortable with this part. I am not comfortable with the second part because as I have watched over my terms the development of the committee functions, and I know Delegate Killian has seen this too, and as well as Delegate Ullman. We've gone from a time when committees played a very minor role, an occasional role, to one where the committees are now an essential investigative arm of what the assembly learns. There's the forum where we dig deeply. We bring people in from the departments, typically, or the administration, and we kind of grill them in real detail, and we make recommendations. But it's advisory, and that's true no matter how we vote. It doesn't bind the assembly. These are never binding. These are recommendations that we make. What I see articulated here is a situation where the committee can essentially block the assembly,
the general body, from considering a matter. And I mean, I look at this and say, you've got committee of 5 people. If 3 people decide this ordinance is going nowhere, they can tie it up. And they force the assembly then into a position where it needs a 2/3 vote to pass it rather than a majority vote. I see that as the committee being given a degree of authority to block. Typically, it's going to be block pending legislation because a few people don't like it, and I'm concerned about that. I would prefer that we stay with the model that we have been working under for the last several sessions, which is the committee investigates, hears, calls witnesses, issues a report, and makes its recommendation, positive or negative, to the general body, which then is fully able to make the decision on their own. So I'm opposed to this part of it, and frankly, because the first part is not a whole lot of difference, I'm going to oppose. I'm going to vote against this resolution.
Okay, we've heard from you, Delegate Green. Delegate Ullman, would you like to speak first, or before I recognize Delegate Green a second time?
Yeah, sure. I'm kind of with Delegate O'Malley. The first part of it doesn't seem to be a lot of difference at all, but seems it does confuse the issue when two members against 3 members would stop it from flowing to the full assembly where it belongs anyway. I mean, I don't see the reason for creating that potential blockage, because it has to end up with the assembly anyway, whether or not we like it or not. It might be something that 3 particular members don't like, or maybe, and 4 don't. I don't care, but it doesn't mean the assembly shouldn't hear it. And I know there's a convoluted path to get back to the full assembly, but it seems as though we're solving a problem that really doesn't exist. So I have concerns. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Green, your hand was up first, and then Delegate Killian. I'll allow you to respond to these. Delegate Green, do you want to add something here?
Yes, I would. So I think one of the things that what Delegate Killian is proposing, that an issue stay in the committee, and if whatever the resolution, the ordinance comes to committee, and it's not, for any reason, it's something that the committee members are not, they're in favor of the concept, but they can't unanimously support whatever it is, that if they come up with a different solution, let's say, and have people in and talk, and have these committee meetings until the issue that is an important issue is, that the heavy lifting, the work is done in the committee. I think that's a positive thing. However, I would like to see the resolution revised in a manner where it would give that flexibility and that structure so that you can keep it in committee. And I do think that, there may be solutions, public-private collaborations that a committee could resolve, could work on, which I don't think we are exploring enough, which, and Delegate Killian has expressed that to me. And I think he's right about that. I think there are a lot of solutions that we have resolutions, we don't agree with them, we vote them down, in committee, it goes to the full assembly, or and it doesn't pass the full assembly, let's put it that way. So I think there's something to that, but again, both of these aspects, I would like to see tweaked. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Delegate Killian, you're next.
Yeah, I just want to point out that this change would have an effect of what gets submitted to the assembly as well, because if, no matter where it comes from, the commissioners or another delegate or the public, is that it would have to be able to pass muster through the committee before it got a vote. And I think that would hopefully bring a greater sense of acuity to what we're reviewing. Now, I don't understand where everyone thinks that, oh boy, we're going to have three people that are going to stop everything from happening. I just don't envision that. I don't know what circumstance that would have. And my fact is, if you couldn't get three people to agree that this piece of legislation, whatever, wasn't good enough to send to the assembly, do we really want to have to debate it? I think it's a pretty low bar still to review something. And hopefully, as I said, the point being that if it's something that there's a great deal of disagreement with at the committee level, that they work to make it agreeable. You to swing one vote from a 2-3 to a 3-2 is not that heavy a bar, and you should be able to craft language to the assembly, say, we approve it, but we recommend these changes. It's really just giving the committees a little more responsibility, if you will, not just to look through, yeah, we're going to pass it, but actually make sure it's better, make sure it's reviewed properly, and make sure what comes in is at the highest level for review. So I don't think this is going to slow anything down. And again, we have the mechanism to take it out of committee. And perhaps if you wanted to change that to a simple majority vote to take it out of committee, I don't have any objection to that. My point here is to encourage the committees to produce something out of there that has a lot of approval, that has at least a majority approval, that says, you know what, this is good. We think the assembly should vote on it. That's all it is. I'm not looking to create a hurdle that makes it very difficult to pass.
Delegate O'Malley.
That said, and I do appreciate the concession there by Delegate Killian that we can lower the bar to a simple majority to discharge this petition. However, I foresee some difficulty because that conversation is again, in essence, a hearing on the proposed legislation. Some sort of hearing would be required in order to understand whether we discharge it or not. Absent that, we haven't given it full consideration. It's my perspective that the role of the committees is advisory and that the assembly is the legislative body. The full convened committee of the whole is the legislative body, and decisions have to be made there. I don't think it's fair to bind the assembly by a vote in a 5-person committee, which, as we both talked, it could be 3 people out of those 5, essentially deciding for the whole assembly. I don't like that. I don't like the feel of that. I don't like the optics of that.
Okay, back to Delegate Killian.
Well, if that's the case, if the votes don't matter, why take them? Why have votes in committee at all if we're not going to, we think everything that comes through is going to go through to the assembly, then why have a vote at all? We'll just review it and say, okay, it sounds good, and that's that. I just don't understand why you think that a more stringent review of the material that goes to the assembly is going to hurt things. I really felt that it would help it. I thought it would give us a better quality of material coming to the assembly, because we know that when it comes out of committee, it is we've been satisfied that we've reviewed all aspects of it. And in the case where it doesn't, where there's a majority of members say, you know what, I'm just not comfortable. We need to do a little more digging on there. I don't see the harm in that. I don't think this is a situation where it could be used to stall things, because I think that exists now. I think if the chair of the committee did not call votes, you have the same effect as you would by stalling it. So I think that this kind of gives a little more order to what we do, so people understand when they submit anything for review, this is the process, and it requires a majority vote to come out. And if it doesn't, then perhaps we kick it back to the author and say, hey, we want these changes before we'll approve it. I don't see that as a problem. I see that as a vast improvement.
Chair, may I respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
I think I fail to see how this deepens the investigative potential that a committee has to deal with legislation. And I think in the background, Jim, we have to recognize, in the polarized environment that we exist in now, that the situation where a committee deadlocks is less likely, and I don't want to disparage how well we work on this assembly, we do, but for future assemblies, the deadlock in a committee is less likely due to we have not investigated it deeply enough, and more likely to arise in a situation of unambiguous polarization. And there may be situations where it's going to be that way. There are three members who are, come hell or high water, no, I'm not going to go with this. I'm uncomfortable with that potential for that to essentially stonewall this piece of legislation, and it never sees the floor of the committee. I mean, I'm aware of that in the State House in Boston, how that happens. I've watched legislation that I have written and attested to goes to committee, and it never gets to the floor because it's shunted aside. I think that's fundamentally not right. I mean, and the State House makes it hard because you up until recently you couldn't even tell what the vote was that sunk that legislation. I think the role of the committees should be advisory, that having given it lots of thought, lots of interviews, lots of digging, this is what the committee recommends, but the assembly has to decide it. I think we should stay with what we got.
Yeah, if I could interject a question to Delegate Killian before going back to you, Delegate Green. So, Delegate Killian, why can't we do this now? What you're trying to say we should do on matters to get to a 3-vote majority, we can make these improvements now in the committee. I don't know why we need to have the hurdle of favorable to do that. If the committee thinks that there are things that ought to be investigated further before it's ready for a vote of the committee, we can do that now. I mean, we don't need to have the favorable only methodology to try to do that. I in particular, I'm kind of thinking of the budget. I mean, what if we can't get the 3 votes on a budget item? I mean, does it not get a report? I mean, we got to report the budget. It's got to be voted by a certain date, or we're stuck with the commissioner's budget. So, I mean, I just don't know why we can't do this now in the committee format that we have.
If I may.
If you can respond, go ahead.
Because there's no mandate to do so, because we can pass something out of committee that we don't like. And I don't think that makes sense. We should be passing something out of committee that we do like, that has been looked at and altered or amended as we saw fit as a committee, so that we believe it's more applicable to what we're voting on. So now, as I said, in the past, we voted things out that the committee didn't approve. 0 to 5 stuff has come out of committee. That to me makes no sense. We should be taking a harder look. If something is that unpopular, we should be finding out why, and we should be making changes. We should be going back to the author of this and saying, we don't like this and we'd like to fix it. And in committee is the place to do that. Well, we have those lines of inquiry, a smaller group of people. That's all. I'm not looking to create another hurdle for us to get over. It just gives the committee more responsibility to produce something that's a quality product.
Okay, Delia Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I am going to play devil's advocate against my better judgment. Why don't we do that with this, see how it works in committee, and not take a vote today on this resolution, and see if we can work it out. Let's see how it works.
We don't have those rules in place, so we can't do that.
Yes, we can. Of course we can.
I mean,
In that case,
If we choose to do it, that's what the chair just said. If we wanted to do it, we could do it. Why not? Let's go for it.
If that's the case, then why are you concerned with this resolution? If we can do it now, then why are you concerned about it?
Because I don't think that we need it. I think what I do think is it would be, I think I'm fine with the speaker making the assignment so that the clerk is, it's not one way or the other where the clerk's been put in a bad position with working with 2 delegates later on and he's making the assignments. It's a speaker. So, and also where, delegates are vying for the clerk's favor. I can see that in the future as a potential. The other thing is, yes, I mean, things are talked about once in a committee, members of the committee may want to explore it further, may want to make it, take an issue and say, yeah, this is really a serious issue. Like the generator thing. I really think that's a serious issue. And I really would like us to really talk about the root causes and the issues around that and have it stay in committee and really do some actual work on that. But I think that having some language around the permission or the norm of it, to stay in a committee until things are worked out is really very positive. And I would be excited about working on the assembly, a renewed excitement in that direction. But right now I mean, we can work on this resolution together, but I can't support it the way it is. Why don't we try it? Why don't we
Well,
try to work on it?
I would ask then if that is something which the committee would like to do, um, how we would have to make some suggestions on how we amend this existing resolution, to make it palatable, to a majority. I mean, in the first place, you'd have to first take at least a straw vote to say, well, are there 3 votes for this right now as is? Because if there is, then there's no need to do further work if you're operating under this proposed resolution. If we don't have 3 votes, then it means it has to stay in committee, and we have to try to make some refinements to it until it gains the 3 votes. If we're going to make this sort of a trial, pretending as if theoretically this was the way we operate. Go ahead, Delegate Killian.
That was what I would only say is the fact that if we don't have a positive vote and you want to keep it in here, it's the exact same thing you're arguing against doing. So I'm not sure if you agree with it and it works for us, and we should do it. I'd say great, let's keep it here and discuss it. And if we all come to a consensus, then we agree that the resolution makes sense.
I would
But it would be
respond
revised.
Yeah, I mean, I will respond to that to say that what we're saying is not that just because you take a vote, you don't get 3 votes. We're saying, doesn't mean we report it immediately. It means that if we were going to do this on some kind of trial basis, we don't report it immediately. It stays in committee, and we see whether we could get to 3 votes. I think that we wouldn't, just because it didn't get 3 votes, we wouldn't immediately report this to the assembly. We'd say we're still working on the matter. That would be the way in which, if we were operating with this in effect,
I agree
that
with
would
you.
be how we do. That would be
I
how we
agree
do
with
it.
you, Deputy Speaker. I am perfectly happy going down that route, but it'll help demonstrate that it makes sense, because here we have a resolution that we don't have a lot of agreement on. So we have the opportunity to make it better rather than just voting it 2-3 or 1-4 out of committee to the assembly. We're going to actually discuss it and perhaps produce something that everybody likes. That's the whole point of this resolution. You've made my argument for me, and I appreciate it.
Just trying to be the honest broker in this debate. I'm going to ask our most senior member, Delegate Oman, if he would like to comment about this idea on whether we, at least only on a trial basis here, keep this for a moment in the committee, and we try to see if there's a way to work with it to achieve the objective of Delegate Killian without some of the existing language in this resolution. You're muted. You're muted.
I would like to see it go to the full assembly. So in that regard, I'd say let's vote it up 3-2 at least, and have it go to the full assembly and discuss it there. That way we'll have accomplished it. If we don't vote at 3-2, if we vote 2-3 or vote not to pass it along, it still goes to the assembly because it's status quo, right? That we haven't changed anything yet. So if we vote at 0-5, it still goes to the assembly. Am I mistaken there? This committee
Sadly, you're
doesn't. No.
So the clerk our parliamentarian is going to try to help us. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Clerk.
our parliamentarian's going to tread very lightly, but I do want to make some comment about the way things are, because this wasn't referred to this committee by the full assembly. I would bet that the speaker is going to honor what the 5 people on this assembly want, right? And not post it for a vote in the full assembly or discussion in the full assembly until you'd like to do that. But there's nothing under the current rules that would prevent the speaker from doing that. Whether you vote on it today, up, down, don't vote on it at all, because the body itself hasn't done it, and there's no rule. If the speaker wanted to put it on the next business calendar, nothing that you do would stop the speaker from doing that. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
That, like, that's the way the things are now, is like, if there was an assignment or a referral by the whole assembly under Robert's rules, my understanding is at that point you would need a discharge to get it back to the full assembly. Right now, you're at the mercy of whatever it is the speaker wants to do with the business calendar. You know, you could say, I want to continue to work on this at another committee meeting, but there's nothing to stop a speaker from putting it on the business calendar, letting the whole assembly have a go. So I just wanted to clarify my understanding of our current rules. That's all.
Good. Delegate Oman, did you want to respond to that, or? I thought I saw your hand.
I think that's what I was trying to get across. But I'm willing to vote it positively so that the speaker is more likely to put it on the agenda for the full assembly. I really think it's that what Mr. Killian did say is that it does plant more responsibility on each committee, and the direction the assembly is going is to be have more committees say more powerful things and have more judgment. So in that regard, you know, I think it already exists, but in that regard, it would quantify the powers of the committees to make decisions. That's the positive side of the paragraph 2. So,
Okay, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to pop in here because I think my speaking shows the problem with this ordinance. You can't make a incredibly important decision. 5 people can't make an incredibly important decision for the assembly as a whole. And in order to, if this gets passed, no ordinance can go before the assembly unless a majority of the committee
point of
approves
order.
it. So
Point of order, please. It's
that
a
means none of us
resolution.
get to vote on it.
Yeah, it's a resolution. I understand. Yeah,
It's a resolution, not an
Whatever,
ordinance.
whatever. If this rule goes through, then none of us would get to vote on it. And I think as Delegate Killian mentioned, the generator question as an example of why he wants this, I think that's a perfect example of why we can't have this, because if it had been voted, if that the committee did not like the way that was written, it would never have gone before the full assembly. The full assembly would not have this topic in front of them to discuss. It would only be in one little committee, whereas the problems we're having with connectivity and taking care of our elderly, we just set up a brand new emergency management department. Maybe the committee in charge of that would want to look into this. You can't just, we're not gonna, you can't just turn these committees into little baby, star chambers. We are an assembly of delegates made up of 15 representatives with a percentage from each town. And that means that everybody has to have a chance to weigh in. It's not, plus just on the other side, how is it legal? If the commissioners, let's say the commissioners send us something, there's a really good chance we're all going to say, no, we don't like what the commissioners sent us. But that doesn't mean we get to say, so forget it. We'll just play with it in committee for all time. If the commissioners send us something, we have to vote on it. So I don't understand even how this is legal. Thank you.
So I just to clarify one point in your comments, Delegate Harder, it there is an escape hatch to get it out of the committee under Delegate Killian's proposal, which he has now even said he's willing to accept a majority and not a two-third. So if it was bogged down in committee, the assembly could, by a majority vote, under his proposal, discharge it.
Except you get one delegate against it, basically, from Barnstable, and that's a really tough ask.
Well,
So
it's a majority.
I don't
It's
think
not
it's
majority.
fair. I think we're a legislative body, and as such, we should legislate. The committee absolutely do the deep dives, the really deep dives, you know, but then we go to the assembly and say, this is the topic. This was the ordinance presented to us. The way we've always done it is the committee comes up, we present it to the assembly, and all of a sudden we start doing the amendments that the committees came up with. That's how it works. And that seems to work fine. Everybody gets to discuss the topic instead of being able to have this little baby star chamber, shut it down and never discuss it again.
Okay, Delegate Killian.
Well, I disagree with that total characterization. I don't think it's very much different than what we have now, where they have to go to committee, it has to get voted out. And as I pointed out earlier, it doesn't mean that it'll get voted out. This just gives, again, I think Delegate Oman echoed my sentiments about just giving them more responsibility. This isn't about slowing anything down. It's about producing a better product. And I'm starting to repeat myself, but this is what we're after. And I have no problem if the deputy speaker wants to keep it in committee to discuss it further. That would, further solidify my point entirely that this is a better way of approaching how we do business. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I'm not concerned you guys are going to tie it up forever, even though maybe you could, because I think we're all professionals here, and I think we treat each other with respect. We respect each other's opinions. I think I have a higher opinion of everyone around me, where I think we can all treat each other collegially and we can discuss these matters and we can make things better. And as far as the commissioners, if they submit ordinances and we have to review, that's fine, but they're going to know that it has to go to committee. And if we have disagreements with them, we send it back and say, hey, we got a problem with this particular part of it. Can you fix it? It's all about making a better product and doing it in a very formal way. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else want to speak to this matter? Let me just see whether there's a sentiment to keep it in this committee for the time being to see if we could work with the language in some way. This is just to get a sense of the committee. Could we get a show of, I guess, Delegate O'Malley, what would you like to say here?
All
You're
right,
muted.
Mike's on. Yeah, I'm not convinced that this is a matter of language. This is a matter of a kind of a fundamental principle here, and that is, does a committee have the ability to stop a piece of legislation that's been introduced? Can they bottle it up and prevent it from getting to the assembly? That I don't see any way around that language. Either the committee can stop it, or the committee continues as it is now on its advisory role, its fact finding and advisory role. So personally, I don't know where we're going to go with continuing this discussion. Yeah, I'll leave it with that.
Okay, Delegate Killian, then Delegate
Just
Ullman, and then Delegate Green. Yep, go ahead.
just a comment, a question of our parliamentarian. Would this be any different than what we currently have? Could the scenario currently exist that a matter before committee could stay there until the chair calls for a vote? Could not continue call for a vote of it out? And could it stay there until he did so? What would prevent that from happening?
So the problem with what's going on now is it's all custom and no rule. And so what that means is that a speaker can decide to put, short of an actual motion to refer by the full assembly, the speaker can decide at any point to put something on the business calendar. It's not stuck at all in committee. And quite frankly, if you were to mandate that every ordinance go to committee first, the same way that under our rules, anything involving finances has to go to the finance committee, right? You still have the same, thing, right? Where that's why the 2/3 threshold versus the majority is an important one, because if you were to take the first part but not the second part, right? Once it's referred to committee by the speaker, now it's essentially stuck there until the committee votes it out, or um, the full assembly wants to discharge it. First of all, I just want to make a distinction, and I almost raised my hand. This is a resolution, not an ordinance. So this is like you can do whatever with this. I mean, your rule change doesn't even contemplate resolutions, right? So I think the key here is, if you've got vague power and custom that's different than a rule means you've tied it up. If the full body does it, the full body does it. But what I see as a trend is a misunderstanding of the idea that the speaker has any power that you don't want to give them at that moment. You can ask former speaker Kevin McCarthy about this. The speaker has no term. When 8 of you decide that the speaker is no longer the speaker, they're no longer the speaker. I'm an elected officer of the assembly. I don't even know what happens if 8 of you decide you don't want me to be the clerk, but I wouldn't be the clerk. And so I just want to clarify that. And so really right now, the speaker has power that's delegated from all of you, and you can take it back at any moment. So that's my take, because I was asked. I wouldn't have submitted that if I wasn't asked. I don't know. Is that what you were asking, or were you asking for something different?
Well,
Delegate?
what I was asking is how this will be very different, because the concern here, and I understand it, is that something could go to committee and never come out because it doesn't get a favorable vote. Is there anything that would stop that from happening now if the chair of the committee just didn't take a vote to move it? If it just sat there because nothing was done to move it up?
What would stop that is, without a referral of the assembly, which you did do after long debate with the generator ordinance 2026-14.
Mm-hmm.
My take would be that can't come out until the whole assembly wants it out, or the committee is done reporting it. And right now, the speaker can kind of do whatever they want, because
Yes.
it's not. This hasn't been, because nothing's been directly referred to committee.
Let me try to answer the question here
Yeah.
from Killian. I think if a chair of a committee, like this committee right now, someone can make a motion, all right, and it's seconded, we take a vote on it. The chair doesn't have the power, it seems to me, by him or herself, to just say there will not be a vote on this and it's going to stay here in the committee. If someone in the committee makes a motion, it will, and seconded, there will be a vote on that motion. I think that's how it works. Isn't that right, Mr. Clerk?
The chair can adjourn the meeting at any time.
But at that point,
If-
it would still, hold on. If that, just my understanding of the rule, not just for 5 years, right? My understanding of the rules is this power flows from all of the 15 of you, because a majority of you pick the speaker, and the speaker picks who's on the committee, including chairs. So the chairs don't have any power that doesn't flow from 15 delegates, or 8 of the 15, to the speaker through the chair. The chair has no power, right? So you can take a motion like that, right? The chair could call for a motion, not call for a motion. If it wasn't referred by the full body, the speaker could decide to ignore all of you and put it on the calendar next Wednesday. It's collegiality and custom, and the body and the way that it works that prevents that from happening. But
Okay.
there's nothing that prevents that from happening in the current rules. So
Okay,
I don't know if that was helpful or unhelpful.
Okay, I hear you. It's just about 5 o'clock, so want to be respectful of all of our time. There's one other resolution that we're supposed to consider if we can today. If we can't, we can't. But just want to make that aware that we've been at this for an hour. So let's see if we can come to some conclusion how to deal with this. Okay, I saw your hand first, Dudley Green. Did you want to speak or not? And then
Well,
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes, yeah, you had asked what we felt about this. I feel like, if this stays in committee, my feeling, the reason why I wanted to do it is to see if Delegate Killian would work with us to change the language, until we all were pleased with the intent of this and the language within. If Delegate Killian thinks that my asking is sort of an example, then that's not the intent of it. I mean, I want to see us working together to come up with something that we all agree on. But and the other thing that I wanted to bring to the attention of this committee is, other speakers have acted in different ways. I've uh, Speaker Princey used the committee of the whole a lot. I mean, so I would ask him about a committee meeting, and he would say, "Oh, that's so important. I think we should bring it before the whole assembly and not have it go to committee." And I would say, "Yeah, sure, that's fine." And and that was mostly on issues that he kind of had the sense, and I had the sense that most people on the assembly would agree with. So by narrowing this down the way it is narrowed, I mean, this that would change that dynamic. I mean, a speaker would never be able to do something, or under this framework, a speaker would not be able to do that. And I thought it worked really well. It's kind of cut out these middle steps for something that everybody pretty much agreed on. So
Well,
there's that.
I would just clarify that. I think even with this, if it was adopted, the speaker having authority over where things go could still say, this is going to the committee of the whole. It's not going to any committee. It's going to the committee of the whole. If we adopted this, I don't think it stops that from happening.
Okay, well, all right. But,
okay.
but the intent of keeping, my intent was to see, someone who put forth a resolution, if they would actually revise it, yeah,
Okay.
to make it more palatable to everybody. Thank
Delegate O'Malley.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we refer PR 6 to the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to not approve.
Is there a second? I'm sorry, Clerk Fletcher.
Might be a quibble, but this committee can't refer anything anywhere. It can make a recommendation for the full assembly to do something. So you can recommend that the full assembly do something, but you can't refer it somewhere else. Even the committee of the whole, which is the full assembly, you don't have that power. So you can give it a favorable or unfavorable recommendation. That's it.
Okay, language corrected. I would recommend that we make a negative recommendation to the general body, Committee of the Whole.
Is there a second on that? Yeah, Delegate Green.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a question. What happens if there's no second on this, or if there's a second on that, and then you have to vote yes or no? At this point,
That's
I'm
the
not
rules.
clear. I'm not clear what actually happens.
Well, I think
Doesn't happen.
if it doesn't get a second, we don't get a vote on it. And that means that that particular motion isn't voted on. But
Okay,
unless the
well,
clerk wants to correct me on that.
okay, thank you.
No corrections required. I think we kind of went through this at the full assembly at the last regular meeting. Any motion that gets a second has to keep moving. But if it doesn't get a second, that's your protection to avoid having to go through a whole process for something only one person wants to do. But even at that point, there's still a branching tree of parliamentary procedure there. So there's a motion on the floor with no second right now is where
Right
we're at.
now. Delegate Omen, I thought I saw your hand.
I'm going to make a recommendation if this does not get a second. That's what I was going to do.
Okay. let me ask Delegates. I think leaving this in committee, the main sticking point with the comments that are not favorable to this resolution is the need for a favorable recommendation for it to leave committee unless there's an override by virtue of a discharge petition, by a vote of, right now, 2/3, it could be changed. So I don't know if that's going to, I don't know if there's any words or there's any approach on this that would satisfy what you're trying to achieve, short of your suggestion that it has to have a favorable recommendation. So I'm not sure leaving it in committee to try to make it better, quote unquote, would accomplish anything, because I don't know what else you could do here, unless
Well,
you're thinking of something.
I'm a man of conviction, and I will listen. I've listened to what everyone had to say, and I will regroup with our clerk, and we'll talk about perhaps language changes, or maybe I'll speak with other members of the assembly to see how they feel about it, and see if we can come up with a solution. But I agree with what I'm saying, that if this is such a lousy piece of a resolution, that it doesn't belong in front of the assembly, I'm willing to live and die by that because I believe it's important. So if we want to continue this matter, there's no urgency to it, but we all know that. So I'm willing to, reconsider, or certainly consider we can revisit this at a later date.
I'll turn to Delegate Omen. So far, there's no second. What did you want to recommend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recommend that this be continued in committee. I like to move that this be continued in committee for further discussion in and out of this committee. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've had a motion, a second. Any further discussion on that motion? Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Killian. I'm
Yes.
sorry, Deputy Speaker Frizel,
Okay.
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley.
Sure.
That's unanimous.
Okay, we'll revisit. Okay, we have another resolution on the agenda. Do people feel as if we have some time? I'd like to, if we could, discuss that. Want to be respectful of our schedules, but
I personally have the time.
okay. Let's see if we can get this matter disposed of. Resolution that's been put forward is Resolution 2026-6, which would deal with proposed resolution supporting the voters' approval for an audit of the state legislature that was sponsored by Delegate Killian and Delegate Frederickson. I don't see Delegate Frederickson here tonight. So Delegate Killian, do you want to start this discussion?
Yeah, I think this is fairly self-evident. I believe we're all aware of a ballot initiative which was passed overwhelmingly back in November 2024. And that ballot question called for the state auditor to have the authority to audit the Mass General Court in a manner that she saw fit, in a manner consistent with all other audits that she does for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And as we've seen over the last year and a half, going on 2 years, the legislature wasn't too happy about that prospect and have gone a number of routes to try and circumvent it. One of the routes they haven't gone, though, is to court to claim that this is a violation of the Constitution and our separation of powers. They have not done that. So they've worked very diligently to limit the scope of the audit. Both the legislature, the legislature passed a law on that, which is sitting now. And I believe the Senate recently passed a resolution regarding this, but nothing's really happening on it. But the legislation that the House passed specifically precluded the courts from getting involved in any dispute between the auditor and the legislature should one arise, which I found rather disheartening. I think what we all have to remember here is the legislature belongs to the people of the Commonwealth. It doesn't belong to the people who occupy the offices up there. It belongs to us. And we, in an overwhelming majority, voted for a state auditor, and we voted to have the auditor look at what the legislature's been doing and conduct a thorough audit. I don't think that's a big ask. I don't think it's it's an unusual thing. I think the county, we as all elected officials here, we are subjected to the rules of audit and open meeting law. I don't think the legislature should be above any laws that we're responsible to undertake. So I think this is a very simple way for the regional government to show support for the large number of people who voted for this question. It isn't necessarily supporting the question one way or the other because it's already been asked and answered, but supporting the voters who in overwhelming numbers said, you know what, this isn't a bad idea. Let's see how the legislature is doing. This isn't simply about finances. When the auditor does her work, it goes beyond finances, goes to process and make sure that things aren't being duplicated. It's about efficiency. And I don't think there is anything wrong with lifting up the covers and seeing how this body functions. And I think that they should do what the voters asked, because last time I checked, this is a democracy they like to talk about. And I think we should uphold the will of the voters.
Okay, Delegate O'Malley.
Well, I'd like to say thank you to Delegate Killian for bringing this forward. I think we have a remarkably non-transparent state house, and I think this is long overdue. This is not a partisan issue. This is really a matter of good governance, and I think it's really critical. The voters have made it clear. We ourselves are subject to that sort of audit, fiscal oversight, and I think it's entirely appropriate for us to get on record and be supportive of this process. So thank you.
Other delegates like to speak to this matter? Yes, Delegate Oman.
Yeah, transparency is always the goal. I got to say that what this resolution asks is that we support this. It doesn't give you much of any power to do so, and if we pass it in committee and then it goes to the full assembly and they pass it, then it goes to the county commissioners, right? And if it doesn't pass those tests, it doesn't go anywhere. So those are 3 steps already, and the end result will be that we're a voice in the wilderness saying we agree with this. We agree with the audit request. That's what I'm seeing. It's a lot of work, and I don't think we have much voice to do it. But who doesn't want transparency? I guess is my question, my thought process.
Delegate Green.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with the past delegates who have spoken. I mean, transparency is ideal, and checks and balances as well. So, with that in mind, I would agree with that. I guess the only hesitation I have is I do agree with a legal. I understand that there are issues with the legal system the way it's been, as far as these issues are concerned. But I do have a hesitancy in that direction as far as, but I do think that it would be responsible for us to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Killian, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, yes, although we are talking about the audit, my intent here is to support the voters who put us in office, who voted overwhelmingly to support this. And I want their voice to be heard, because we're going to amplify their voice. And that's the whole point. I don't think it's a real heavy lift to push this through the assembly and have a vote on it. But I would ask Clerk Fletcher, I believe regardless, if the commissioners rejected, we could still override their rejection with a 2/3 vote. Is that correct, Clerk Fletcher?
My understanding, because this resolution, it doesn't express an opinion of the assembly, but of the Cape Cod regional government as a whole, it would function, not to confuse the issue with the previous conversation, it would function the same way as a resolution, because the charter doesn't dictate that ordinances go to the commissioners. It's any measure that you pass that doesn't doesn't just, it isn't an internal assembly thing. Take, for instance, the previous resolution, if you had passed it, that wouldn't go to the commissioners no matter what. This one does, and it functions the same way you're familiar with an ordinance. So as you said, if the commissioners rejected it, it would come back to you. And within 14 days, you'd have to take a vote. And if you passed it again with delegates that represented 2/3 of the county's population rather than delegates that represent a majority, then this would be the opinion of the regional government, despite their lack of approval.
Thank you.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That sort of goes to what my question was going to be, which is, if Delegate Killian would just be willing to change it from, the whole regional government to the Assembly of Delegates, and we just pass this as a resolution saying we're all in favor of this, and we're going to send a letter, then do we need to do all the steps that Dean Oman was talking about, or can we just say yes, we're all in favor of this, or if the assembly votes on it, but the people of the assembly support the audit, and we'll send a letter or something so we don't have to deal with the commissioners. That's my question. If we can just somehow say this is fabulous, we support it. Thank you.
If I can respond to that, Mr. Chair, I would put it to the committee. I think I like the idea of having the commissioners weigh in on this issue. I think it's an important issue, and I would not be remiss if I said, hey, why not let them vote up or down on it? We can always take it up if they refuse. But again, I would put that to the committee if they have any strong feelings on that.
Delegate Oman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a lawyer, nor have I the purpose of portrayed one on television. So, when reading through the notes that I got for today, you wonder about the timing of this, because one of the legislatures, the Senate, did approve a 4-step proposal for 4 years, and the House has not. The House actually took quite a different turn, but the SJC is mulling it over right now, and it hasn't decided. I think maybe this is not quite the right time to send this up, and even though this may not be the smartest thing I've ever said, it's still the truth. When you challenge the legislature and you get your money from the legislature, you better be on good terms, and you better be very sure of what you're saying in the right timing of it. So I'm curious if this committee thinks that this is exactly the right time, or should we wait? Because I don't think anything is going to matter either way as far as changing minds. Wait until the SJC actually rules on this, and that would give us a lot more powerful voice to say this. If the Supreme Court of the state of Massachusetts says that this has to be done, I would be very much more comfortable doing it then. Even though, again, as I started this whole thing out with this, I'm an advocate of transparency. I think it reaches up to the Epstein files. Why aren't we screaming about that? We're screaming about this. Transparency is important, and it seems like lots of governments, all the way up to the federal, are not very good about transparency. So I'm not sure that this is the right time to do this. This committee can vote the way it will. I'm for transparency. I probably won't vote yes at this day about this regarding the pending Supreme Court of Massachusetts ruling on this. Thank you.
I will recognize you, Delegate Kelly, and then I want to address some remarks myself. Go ahead, Delegate.
Well, to comment on Delegate Oman, like the assembly, the judiciary gets its money from the legislature as well. I don't have a tremendous amount of faith in them. And to say it's too soon, it has been almost 2 years, and I don't think this is going to be resolved, at least to my satisfaction. I would say to the voters' satisfaction, anytime soon, because I think what they're talking about, both the Senate and the House, is a restricted audit, and one that does not allow the auditor to go to court to try and adjudicate disagreements. So I just think no matter what comes out of either house, either chamber, and the judiciary is going to be much less than what the voters voted on. And I've heard the legislature, I've heard all kinds of stories saying that the voters didn't know what they were voting on, et cetera, et cetera. I just find it a lack of respect for those who put them in office. And I think there's no reason to wait. I don't think anything's going to happen in the next few weeks. And I think, as a matter of fact, I think the Board of Selectmen from Delegate Omen's town actually sent a letter to the legislature affirming the will of the voters and asking them to go through with the audit. So, and that's among many towns that have done that. So I think I don't think there's any reason to wait. I think we can certainly send this along, tell them what we think, and I think that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Okay. Delegate O'Malley?
I accept the political perspective of Dean Omen on this one, and given that this has been a long time coming, and quite frankly, I see no absolute urgency. I'm inclined to say, good. Let's put this on the shelf for the time being. Let's hear what the SJC has to say about it. And we can always come back. We can always pick this up and do it. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but awaiting some higher judgment on it may make sense.
Thank you. My own thoughts on this is I'm not inclined to vote for it. And I put the institution of the assembly separate from my own personal opinion. Personally, I voted for this as one of the 72%. And yes, transparency is a great thing. However, I'm concerned about the precedential value of starting the assembly down the road of debating and taking time and dealing with ballot questions. I mean, there are other ballot questions that are coming this fall. There's one on gun control. There's going to be another one on marijuana. Do we take up those ballot questions if we find the legislature is doing or not doing something we like? I don't see it really directly relates enough to the work of the assembly that we do on behalf of the citizens of Barnstable County to warrant our weighing in on this. I separate what we do as an institution from what we do as our own voters on these matters. And then another reason I'm not inclined at this time is somewhat what's been already expressed. There appears to be very close settlement between the auditor and the Attorney General before the SJC on what the auditor would like to get and what the auditor will get. And the auditor, through her attorney, appears to be in agreement with the Attorney General now and the SJC upon what will be disclosed. So if there's a pending and imminent legal settlement of this, I think that will resolve the matter. If the legislature, in the light of that, goes beyond what is agreed to by the SJC and the Attorney General and the auditor, then that could be another matter. I'm also, by the way, appalled at the House bill, and I can find the Senate bill more acceptable. But the House bill, by taking the judiciary out, is bad. But again, this is, to me, not closely enough related to what we do, and I'm concerned about the presidential value of starting to go down this road with matters that are not as germane to our business. We can find, arguments can be made about, democracy, transparency, it's part of our business, but I think it has to be a more direct effect than that indirect effect. Delegate Killian.
Well, I don't think this is so much supporting the ballot question as it is that the voters approved it. We're not coming out ahead of time and saying vote one way or the other. So I'm supporting my constituents. This is what this is about. And I will count on you in the future then, Delegate Frizel, when matters come before the assembly, which have nothing to do with county government, and we decide to have an opinion on them. And I will count on you to make sure that where your opinion lies is consistent. Thank you.
Delegate Omen. You're muted.
Thank you. I move the question.
Well, we'll take a roll call vote on that, clerk. Go ahead.
What is the question?
Yeah, I don't think we have a question in front of us. Do we have a
Yeah.
motion in a second yet? So there is no question, but I think you can make a
Well-
motion if you'd like to.
No. Okay, I move that we vote on the resolution as presented.
What are we voting on? We got to vote to either send it to the assembly or not, or what are we doing?
I thought that you were arguing before Delegate Omen for delay in staying in the committee. Now I think you're voting a motion that we now pass this resolution.
No,
Or recommend
no,
it.
actually, that was the last, that was number 5. Number 6, I would move, I would ask that we vote negatively on the resolution.
On this resolution on the audit,
Number 6, on the audit.
so an unfavorable recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. I will second that. I guess now we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any further discussion on it before we take a roll call vote? I see.
Point of order, I'd
yes.
ask the clerk to clarify what
Okay.
a yes vote or a no vote will mean.
Yeah.
That's for the chair.
Well, as I understand it, well, it may not be, but as I understand it, the motion is for unfavorable recommendation. So a yes vote would be saying you do not favor the recommendation of this to the assembly. A no vote would be the opposite, and that would just mean I think that perhaps what you have to do to make this no vote yes vote thing work right is you have to make an motion for favorable recommendation, and you vote yes or no. If the no votes prevail, it's not a favorable recommendation. If the yes votes prevail, it's a favorable recommendation. I would think that's probably easier from a purpose of parliamentary procedure, clerk, or not?
Well, because you're the chair, you get to make this ruling subject to approval of the rest or appeal for the rest of the members. However, I do think that's right, and we trip over this a lot. If you it's better to make a favorable recommendation, and then we know that if the favorable recommendation doesn't
Fails.
pass, that it's an unfavorable recommendation. Or you
Right.
can, which I believe what the dean was trying to do is say, I'm moving to make a recommendation, and then if it's 2-2-1, there's no recommendation. If it's if it's a yes vote and there's 3 yes votes, then it's a favorable one, right? So
Yeah.
that's what it means in essence.
Dean, over.
So through the chair, Mr. Parliamentarian, does that mean that the chair will have to rescind his second so I can amend mine?
I don't
Is that
believe
how
so,
this
because
goes?
that was your original motion was I would like us to make a recommendation. What is it? I think the chair has kind of clarified a yes vote means you're recommending it favorably, and no vote means you're recommending it unfavorably. I suppose an abstention would mean I don't want to vote on this and I'm not participating in this. And that's what it means. Not, you don't want to vote on this. So I believe that's
So
correct.
so
I think you're good.
in
If the
essence,
chair thinks you're good.
if I am going to vote no, and that means I do not want this to go forward to the assembly. If that's clear, I got it. Thank you.
No. A yes, no. If you're voting yes, then you're saying it's a favorable recommendation to the assembly. If you're voting no, then it means it's not a favorable recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Okay, let's take the roll call vote, Mr. Clerk.
Delegate Crane,
I abstain.
Delegate Killian. Oh, you're
You're
muted.
muted.
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Frizel.
No.
Delegate O'Malley. You're
Yes, muted.
Abstain.
And Dean Omen.
No.
Oofa.
2-1.
1 yes, 2 no's, 2 abstentions.
You're up
doesn't-
against one of my very unfun ones. I'm not entirely sure how to count the abstentions. It's present in voting. The abstain makes it weird. So
Well,
if you give me a minute, yeah, I
Yeah.
can clarify that.
clarify
But
that for us.
you'll have to give me a minute.
Can we clarify the vote?
I mean,
It's
everyone's
one-
gonna know what happened anyway. You're not, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I can try
I
to
mean-
clarify that while we're speaking, but like
Well,
I don't want to get it wrong.
you could simply report, and we could file a report saying there was a motion made for favorable recommendation. The vote was 1 yes, 2 no, 2 abstentions, period. That was the vote.
Exactly. I mean, it's the hour's late. I could sit here and clarify, and it's probably worth my time to do, to figure out what an abstention means in this small, right? Whether it's 2 to 1 and 2 abstentions, but like the whole point is what you're saying, that the report will reflect the entire discussion and who voted what on this. And so don't get tripped up, in my opinion,
Yeah.
on whether it's favorable or unfavorable
Right.
recommendation. It's
Right.
we all know where all of you stand.
Right.
And why, or we will
Right.
after we're done, and I will send whatever report Emma and I draft to all of you. I know that you actually have a group that likes to read these things very closely and come up with corrections. So if any of you have any corrections about how Emma and I are presenting what occurred here, I'll send it to you before I send it out to the full assembly. Does that sound good? And I will get an answer that's like rock solid on the abstentions. I don't know if people remember, this occurred 2 or 3 years ago in the Natural Resources Committee about a vote on a budget. So we'll get that straightened out. But one way or another, everyone will know what happened. I don't want to hold you up while I figure that out.
Yes. Is that okay? I think that that would work. I think we'll all take a look at the report and it will speak for itself as we get to the assembly. It's being reported out of committee to the assembly on that basis. Any other business? Because without seeing any objection, I'm ready to say that we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your
Thank
thoughtful
you.
participation. And
Thank you
have a
very
good
much.
rest of the day. Bye now.
Thank you.